So good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Yeah, thank you. So we usually sit for about a half an hour on these Sunday mornings, so we'll do that now. You can just close your eyes if you want. You can keep them open if you'd like to do that too. If you want to keep your eyes open, you can just place them kind of downward and on one spot, so we're not just looking all over for something interesting, more stimulating, but we're really taking the opportunity to go inward. And if you're going to close your eyes, and just let them gently close. And we find a restful posture for the body. It's not going to be perfectly comfortable, but comfortable enough, restful enough. We can experiment with not trying to make anything happen, not even trying to be a good meditator. We just have this intention to be present, to be here, to know what it's like to be a human being in this moment. With the body that feels like this. In a mind that feels like this. We can see how natural it is to feel something. How natural it is to feel the body. It can be useful just to encourage the mind to rest in awareness of the body. Not in a demanding way. Not even asking the mind to notice anything in particular. And we're mostly interested in the quality of the mind, what it actually feels like to rest here with the body. Can the mind relax and know the body? Is relaxation a supportive quality of mind? Does it support our ability to abide, being aware of the body? And sometimes we notice this in contrast to these moments where we don't feel that relaxed. Or the mind is living through some expectation. We can ask, is it beneficial to live through some expectation? Does it support awareness? When the mind's aware, when we notice, the mind is knowing something. Some gross physicality of the body, pressure, coolness, warmth. Something more subtle, pulsing, tingling, moving. How does the mind receive these experiences? Is there a felt sense of connection? Maybe even warmth, care. Friendliness. And how does that change our felt sense of awareness when we remember these qualities? When we remember that awareness includes a feeling of connection. A kind of warmth. A friendly inclusion. Once again, sometimes we learn to appreciate connection. In part when we notice the absence. Oh yeah, this doesn't feel like that. It feels different. What happens when I bring this possibility of connection to mind? When I remember this mind is also a heart that cares. Is it still possible to just be present in very ordinary ways? To remember the body in very ordinary ways? To receive the experience that's here and now without trying to get anywhere, create expectations. In our spiritual practice, live through these ordinary moments. And infuse and be infused with the quality of care, friendliness, kindness. So that awareness itself gets stronger. We feel more capable. And perhaps we even feel steadied. Steadied by care. We'll continue in silence now. Take a minute to stretch your legs if you'd like. Tom, can we turn the lights up? You're right behind Sherry. The top one, yeah, great. The top ones. Thank you. Welcome to everybody. It's good to see so many of you on this warmish winter day here in Minnesota. Warmish is a good word, right? Feels a bit like a heat wave. I'm here filling in for Mark on these Sunday mornings while he's away teaching at the Forest Refuge in Barre, Massachusetts. Ironically, I'll be headed there to teach the month of January just as he comes home to resume teaching here at Common Ground. So it's wonderful that we can sub for each other when we're away like this. So, and you'll get a chance to hear from other teachers too. Wynn Fricke, one of Common Ground's co-founders, will be here teaching on the 22nd, just in a couple weeks, which is great too. I'll just get a couple of announcements out of the way so I don't forget at the end. And one of them is just to, I wanted to start by appreciating how what it feels like there's a harmonious vibe here this morning, and particularly appreciating Gabe Keller-Flores here, who is our operations manager. Questions about the center, he can answer almost everything, and I'm certainly willing to do that too. And then we have Tom over here and Lisa, who may be out in the lobby right now, but our program hosts are there. There you are. Hey, Lisa. And just Gabe and these two just put together the room and greeted people, and it just feels so sweet to be welcomed that way. I know I feel it. And then we have Nico back here, who's helping out with the audio, and Rock, who is somewhere. Hey, Rock. Nico's been doing audio or supporting the audio at Common Ground on Wednesday nights for a while, and Rock's going to be a new audio volunteer in the weeks to come. So just appreciating all it takes to make a community tick like this. And in particular, for me, years ago, more than 20 years ago now, when Common Ground was located at Mark and Wynn's house, a few blocks to the east of here, you can hear the nerves in my voice sometimes when I speak, maybe all the time, maybe now. But yeah, I'm an introvert, like many of you. Public speaking's not an obvious career path. And back in those old days, I think back, I don't know if I would have gotten here to be able to teach without starting by greeting people on Sunday evenings. And it was a time when we had this new idea of program hosting that would, help the programs run smoothly and help the people feel welcome. And I have no idea. I chastised myself on the way home that evening when Mark said, we're going to try this new thing out. Anybody want a program host? And I stepped up and got trained in 10 minutes. And then I drove home and was like, what did you just say yes to? It's like the worst thing ever. But that led to, just taking on a little bit more volunteering and working in the office. And I just appreciate that ethos of Common Ground, just the community supporting itself, always supporting itself, and all the many ways that this community has kind of been a grassroots, growing, living organism in which people show up to do all kinds of things, clean the bathrooms, sweep the floors, say hello to people, fix things. Tom is also helps with the electrical work in the building and gets the cameras mounted and the closet straightened and, the website reconstructed, and just imagine all the details it takes to take care of a building and a community, and somebody's doing those things, all the things that I've left out. So if you feel like I did, that I want to be a part of this community, and although this may not make a lot of sense for my personality habits, I know I want to be a part of this community. And a way to be a part of this community is to just hold myself to a standard of doing it, right? Just do it. And just see what it feels like to commit, to really step in there. And so, yeah, if you'd like to volunteer in some way, please don't hesitate to talk to me, talk to Gabe. In particular, we need folks on Sunday mornings who normally come to Sunday mornings to do more program hosting. We could use a handful of more audio volunteers. You can see Nico back there. Did you get a good sit in this morning, even well? Yeah. Great. You still can participate, and it just feels wonderful to be a part of something. So if you're looking for something like that, please consider it. And then we have a whole lot of programs coming up, so find something that feels useful for you to dig into. And the rest of the month and into the new year, in January, we always have some new things. Mark will resume teaching Buddhist studies if you've been interested in that. We have retreats and guest teachers coming forward in January too. And as always, I don't know how many years we've been doing a New Year's Eve celebration, maybe as long as the organization's been around, but we have a New Year's Eve celebration that begins usually at about 7, and we bring in the new year together, finishing just after midnight. You can come for different pieces of that. We ask that you try to come at 7 if you can. This year, Mark will give a full dharma talk, his regular Tuesday night program. So he'll be doing that virtually this year. So we'll have a screen in here, and we'll all listen to him give a dharma talk. And then Gabe and I and others will lead us through the evening for the rest of the time. We'll do some chanting. We'll make a poem together, which is always a exciting thing to do. And I don't know, we'll have a potluck. Come for the potluck. We'll have music. Gabe wears many hats here. He's also a musician, so he's going to play some of his new songs, maybe some old songs, who knows what he curates for us. But Ellis Delaney, who is also a wonderful singer-songwriter in the community and has been playing at this New Year's Eve program for many, many years, is also going to be joining Gabe and having some music. So it feels like the right thing to do. Hope you join us. All right. Take a couple of breaths together. Transition into a different kind of dharma offering. I wanted to talk a little bit, share some reflections on mindfulness and love, or the intersection of mindfulness and love. And although it may seem like what I just offered was logistical, it's definitely about mindfulness and love, right? How we take care of a community, how we participate in the construction of a community. It's where our mindfulness and love gets to show up in relationship to one another. And I, over the years, have really grown to appreciate more and more these small moments in our everyday life that can sort of go overlooked, where our practice is actually expressing itself in some beautiful way. I didn't, until I thought back through the years about my own journey here at Common Ground, and I didn't remember oh yeah, sweetie, you really did want to be a part of a community. You really wanted to grow some roots here at Common Ground. And that's why you did the hard thing, to step forward and be a program host, right? So there's a beautiful intention that's birthed in moments in our ordinary life that sometimes we don't notice until we reflect back on them. But we can begin to notice them in real time too, and to use our full life and all the ordinary moments in our lives to get curious about what's being set in motion. What is my heart expressing right now? What about what I care about is being expressed in this very ordinary moment when I'm talking to my partner, or taking care of my kids or cooking dinner or helping a neighbor or driving somewhere or shopping or doing whatever we need to do to take care of ourselves and each other. So some of you know I'll start with a chapter from this book on these Sunday mornings when I'm here in December. This is called A Heart as Wide as the World. It's a book by Sharon Salzberg, one of the co-founders of Insight Meditation Society, the parent organization to Common Ground. And this is called Never Alone. Loving kindness, or metta, is one of the main meditation practices of the Buddhist tradition. It's a practice that involves offering a sense of loving kindness to oneself, and then extending this offering to loved ones, friends, acquaintances, difficult people, and ultimately to all beings everywhere. Once, when I was teaching a loving kindness retreat, one of the students told me about the impact this practice had on her life. She said that the entire past year of her life had been filled with a great deal of loss and disappointment. It would have been easy for her to become disconsolate, except for one thing: her recognition that somewhere in the world somebody was offering loving kindness to all sentient beings. By definition, that included her. Somebody somewhere, never having met her, not knowing her situation, not having any personal connection to her, was actually sending her thoughts of loving kindness. Someone was opening their heart and wishing for her happiness, peace, safety, and freedom. This was happening simply by virtue of the fact that she existed. She was a sentient being, and that was enough for her to be a deserving recipient of the force of love. This recognition, she said, was the singular force that had given her the strength to go on, to keep her heart from breaking during difficult times. How wonderful to know that there is always someone who is dedicating this very moment to generating love and compassion for you, without knowing who you are, not because you are especially nice, not in exchange for any favor or out of obligation, but simply because you exist. Someone right now is deeply wishing you well, wishing for your happiness. If, like this person on the retreat, we can recognize this, then we realize that we are not isolated in our suffering. No matter what our particular circumstances, we are never completely alone. We are each receiving this force of beneficence. We can also recognize that when we practice metta, when we offer love and compassion, we are giving a true and powerful gift. Somebody, somewhere, is very gratefully receiving it. How does that feel to receive that? Yeah. Feels like something. Let's see a show of hands. How many people remember every day, or let's say once a week? How many people remember once a week that someone somewhere who doesn't know you is wishing you well? Yeah, oh, right. A few people, a handful of us. Yeah. It's not that easy, right? But we can remember that even right now in a room, we don't all know each other, but we practice having some good vibes for one another. Even in our meditation, we are practicing that. We're practicing for one another because our practice naturally seeps out of ourselves and spreads all around through our interactions and engagements with each other. It's always happening, right? The way we study a room together, more than 100 of us on a Sunday morning, close our eyes, get still. We're cultivating something that's useful, that's beneficial for everybody else. And there's a particular practice of loving kindness that includes a direct cultivation of the attitudes or emotions or sensibilities that we might say of the Brahma Viharas, or these kinds of these aspects of love, these different flavors of love. And that particular kind of cultivation is age old. It's been going on for thousands of years. And all the Buddhist practitioners all over the world, many, many people practice this, which includes extending wishes of goodwill to all beings, not just the people we know, not just the people we love, not just the people we're familiar with, but we intentionally bring to mind people that we maybe just met or had a brief encounter with, a quick moment in the grocery store or something. We intentionally bring to mind people that we don't know very well, right? And we practice extending metta to them. And then we invite this quality of the heart that really knows what to do on its own. It knows how to expand. When this quality gets strong, it just kind of moves through us. That's how we see and how we can acknowledge these moments of metta or loving kindness in our daily life, because that quality of heart knows what to do, right? It knows how to move. When we remember it, it knows what to do. And so it's not hard to actually imagine that there are, if we just say Buddhist practitioners, all over the world, that are purposefully sending you wishes of goodwill, in part because they don't know you. And they go like, okay, can I cultivate the heart that's willing to go everywhere and to imagine people in this country and other countries in the universe, and just extend that offering of goodwill there. And sometimes that the heart's willingness to do that is in part because we know life is challenging. Right? It's not easy to be a human being. And sometimes that little bit of truth that lines up with our own experience of difficulty, of suffering, of stress, just simple moments of stress, right? It makes it a little bit easier to soften to people we don't know. Oh yeah, it's hard, isn't it? Just living a human life is challenging. And so perhaps that moment of reality can help us soften to beings that, are just doing the best we can. So just to be able to welcome the goodness of the world, the goodness of human beings, that is purposefully directed at you and sometimes indirectly directed at you. Purposefully, intentionally, when we cultivate loving kindness, and indirectly, like in moments of sitting in a meditation hall like this, that we get to be grateful recipients of the goodness of others. It's sweet. And it's not just something that's received, it's something that's offered because you're doing it too. So there's something really important to recognize, especially in moments when it feels like things are rough, and it often feels like things are rough to me in the world. But it's important to recognize that this heart knows how to express its own inner goodness, and we might say innate goodness. Because this quality of loving kindness, one of the things we learn in the Buddhist teaching is that it's natural. It's a naturally occurring experience. So your heart knows how to love. Your heart knows how to be good. My heart knows how to be good. Because it's natural to the human condition. And so sometimes what we're actually doing is making way for, in meditation practice, is making way for that to express itself. And sometimes we have to be diligent about that. But it's always good when we are. And we can see that this heart has a real good habit of being rebellious. Yeah. Forgetting, like very few hands went up in the room. I don't know, Zoomers, you didn't see that, but very few hands went up in the room, right? With that early question. Do you remember? Yeah. We don't always remember because this heart develops that skill of being rebellious. And then we double down on it and justify it, don't we? I was noticing this just not that long ago. I was noticing how easy it was to justify the heart's irritations. And even though, I feel like I'm a serious student of Buddhist practices, and I've been at this a long time, the mind will kind of justify its irritations, and it's abiding in ill will in those moments. Because, I'm comfortable right now, and somehow I'm taking for granted that my partner's just going to take it. Right? Or worse, like I justify my own irritation because she's wrong. Something like that, right? And so I was noticing that these little moments of irritation that the mind was willing to overlook them until I noticed, like, oh, wait a second, this is actually a habit that the mind is learning to abide in, a habit of ill will. And that's not metta. And it's impossible for the heart to abide in a moment of metta and a moment of ill will at the same time. And so just knowing, like, oh, if I want to be able to give and receive love, then I have to hold this heart to a high standard. Right? I don't practice ill will if I want metta. It just doesn't make logical sense, right? If we want to practice metta, then we learn how to cultivate metta. And there was a moment with my partner that her goodness totally outshined the ill will. Because the mind was justified in its expression of ill will, just a little irritation. I don't even know if she noticed it, but she may have. She probably did. But it was just like a little irritation, like, oh, I didn't even know if it leaked. But like, oh, this is a justifiable habit in this moment. And then I quickly saw, like, oh, she actually was illuminating some kind of very sweet kindness. As she was asking me questions generously, wanting to know what I wanted to eat that day. And I was like, oh, this moment of irritation is clearly born of this heart. It clearly does not belong projected onto her, right? And yet the mind justified that until that moment in which it was obvious that it didn't belong, right? Or it didn't go. It belonged because it was there. But it didn't align with the truth of the moment. And so it's good to remember, like, one of the marks of a good student is that we keep getting curious about what is loving kindness? What is awareness? How do they go together? How do they support our lives? Where do they show up? Where does the mind justify its unskillful habits? Where does the mind make concessions like that? Like, oh yeah, this is justifiable. Nobody's even going to know. Until I realize a day later, like, oh yeah, this does add up. It does. The habit of ill will then definitely gets strengthened. And now the heart is easily going back there more and more often. It's not easily going to metta. But in contrast, when the heart remembers that it knows how to be good and is more willing to expect that metta is there instead of expect that the heart doesn't know how to do metta, then it definitely gets stronger with time. So do we expect that the heart is close to metta every day? We don't really expect that, do we? We see all the ways in which the heart is not close to metta. And I think, at least for me, I don't always expect that everybody else's heart, I don't always expect that your heart is close to metta either. A hypothetical you. But when the heart learns to trust, learns how to have some faith in the capacity of its own goodness, then it can start to notice that this heart is close to metta right now, in this moment, even in this moment of feeling ill will, even in this moment of abiding in ill will. Just, is it possible to have a bigger view? Like to set down my clinging to this ill will and notice like, oh, sweetie, your wife is actually being really generous right now. Notice that. Oh, how sweet it is to be loved, right? How sweet it is to be cared about in this moment. That somebody right now whom this heart had forgotten to pay attention to is actually sending love my way. How sweet that is. And how many moments happen like this. I was listening to a talk by a wonderful Dharma teacher, Sylvia Boorstein. Many of you might know Sylvia. She's one of the, maybe a grandparent in this tradition, teacher. Teaches a lot at Spirit Rock. She's 88 years old right now. And I was just interested in this kind of ordinary movement of metta and how it shows up and where it comes from. And I was interested in cultivating it when I was at the bank and while I was in my dog walks and in these ordinary moments with my partner. And one of the things that I appreciate from some of our elder teachers is that they teach a lot in stories sometimes. And I get this from Sylvia. She's lived a lot of life, right? And Sylvia is somebody that I tune into sometimes, at least online, in part because a long time ago, Mark said to me that Sylvia was one of the most spiritually powerful people he'd ever been around. And I was like, oh yeah. Curious about that that powerfully, spiritually loving combination. And it's true, like all of these stories, sometimes, the mind has to let go of its looking for particular definitions, although I like that, or making particular meanings come together with words and language in that way, and although I do like that too. But to just kind of back up and feel the transmission. Feel the transmission of love and awareness, or a life that's infused with love and awareness, and how it feels to be in that orbit. That Sylvia, is 88. She's been teaching for a long, long time, one of the co-founders of Spirit Rock Meditation Center, and for probably 40 or 50 years has been offering metta to the world and through these ordinary moments of life. And I'm actually benefiting from that. She told a story about taking a trip, and taking a trip and coming back from that trip and packing lots of little bottles of gifts like salts and spices and stuff for people back home to give them to, and then to find out she thought she had done it just right so that her bag didn't get flagged, and then to go through the airport and her bag got flagged and all of those little gifts got confiscated. And she was feeling the kind of irritation or little mini moments of ill will arise in her heart in that moment, and then recognizing the person who was just doing a job, and she was looking for metta. One of the ways metta gets described as connection. This gets described in many ways, like as a sensibility, as an attitude, as an emotion. An important way is as an intention. It's the intention that leads us to, that fuels our life's activity. And it also can get described as a connection. Sharon Salzberg described it that way. I may have a quote from her at some point, but. And so she was looking for some connection. She was looking for some salve for that ill will, right? Just a little irritation. Not big ill will, but just little irritation of the heart. And so she just connected with this person, and she said, "Do you like your job?" And he responded something like, of course I don't like confiscating bottles of salt from old ladies. And in that moment, she was like, of course you don't, you know? Like, you are not out to get me. We are not enemies here. Yeah. And just a sweet, maybe an awkward question, an awkward response, but a moment that expressed some humanity that was always there, right? It just was being covered over by something. There's a word that gets repeated in the Satipatthana Sutta, this discourse in which the Buddha taught us how to meditate, how to establish mindfulness through these 4 foundations of mindfulness. And it's the place where most of our meditation instruction comes from. So I was about to say it's relatively important. It's really important. Yeah. And there's this, the Buddha goes through each of the 4 foundations and he says something like, one abides observing, as an example, the body as a body, and each of the 4 foundations this way. I'm not going to go through them all right now, but one abides observing the body as a body, ardent, fully aware and mindful, setting aside desires and discontent for the world. And these phrases, this very short couple of sentences that gets repeated in the Satipatthana, it's worth digging into to try to understand, I think, what the Buddha was suggesting for us here. And in part, this one word abide, this word abide and the word ardent, I've explored those in my life. Like the mark of a good student, I think I was starting to say, is to stay curious about what it is that we're doing here. And at least I found in my life that as soon as I think I know, it's a dangerous place to be. Because the mind stops being curious. What is love like? How many flavors does it have? What is ill will? Like, am I justifying ill will by justifying these small moments of irritation? And what does it mean to actually abide? What does it mean to set down desire and discontent for the world? Does it mean to not care about the world? I don't think that's it. But I think the Buddha is pointing to how it doesn't, these places where the mind justifies hanging out that aren't skillful places, they actually don't help. And sometimes we have to learn that lesson the hard way. We have to, like I did, justify ill will, eventually feel the pain of that, and then finally get curious about how to not keep cultivating that and learn to expand our awareness a little bit further in that moment. So I don't think it's about not actually caring about other people or about the state of the world or, the state of my life or your life or our connection. I don't think it's that at all. But it's learning to not just hang out in these places that are not going to actually help us be better people. And then this word abide, one of the ways that metta falls into this category of the divine abodes, or these four expressions of love, we might say. Loving kindness, or love, or benevolence, or friendliness, all different translations. Compassion, appreciative joy, and equanimity, the divine abodes. And in this Satipatthana Sutta, the Buddha says to abide observing, right? To abide in mindfulness, we might say. To abide in awareness. Or let's use some other words. To abide in presence. Or to abide in this capacity to attune to the way it is. Or to abide in the sensitive heart. Or to abide in intimacy. Not easy to do, right? And different words resonate differently with us at different times. So a good student will just explore, like, what does it actually mean to be mindful? What does it mean to abide? Or to attune? What does it mean to attune to this presence, this embodied presence, this emotional being, this sensitive being? What does it mean to abide, explore what it's like to be a human being in relationship to other human beings who are also sensitive? To practice intimacy in this way. And I was very recently, don't know why it took me so long, but recently realized that abide and abode are just, they come from the same root. So abide is like the action word and abode is like the noun. So a divine abode, or like a holy dwelling place. I like the word holy, a sacred dwelling place. Like the sacredness of kindness, the sacredness of love, the sacredness of compassion. You know, a place to call home. What's it like when we feel at home somewhere? Not an actual home maybe, but a place we feel at home. Is there a sense of relaxation and ease where the heart can actually feel into its sensitivities? It can actually learn how to pull back the weeds and feel into what's lurking beneath the surface, what's there, what's home. Can we learn to practice awareness, to cultivate, to do the action, right? There's some effort that it takes to live, to intentionally live a life of awareness. I have to really care about that in order to be willing to see, oh yeah, the heart, sweetie, is abiding in ill will right now. Oh yeah, and look at the way your wife is engaging right now. She doesn't look like that. You know, she looks quite generous and loving right now. The heart has to be interested in doing the work of being mindful in that moment to actually feel that, right? So there's a kind of effort it takes to be aware, to abide. And this dwelling place of home, we have to be able to trust, the possibility that exists there too. I want to read a couple more things before we close, so bear with me, just a couple of good stories to maybe see how metta is illustrated differently. And so that it paints a picture for us about the wide scope of how we can practice throughout every moment of our lives. This is from a book called Tattoos on the Heart. It's a book by Father Gregory Boyle. And he started an organization called Homeboy Industries. Some of you might know this book. It's a wonderful book of stories of what it means to be in sacred relationship with people who are trying to get out of the gang life. He said, I had a 23-year-old homie named Miguel working for me on our graffiti crew. As with a great many of our workers, I met him years earlier while he was detained. He was an extremely nice kid whose pleasantness was made all the more remarkable by the fact that he had been completely abandoned by his family. Prior to their rejection of him, they had mistreated, abused, and scarred him plenty. He calls me one New Year's Day. "Happy New Year, G." "Hey, that's very thoughtful of you, dog," I say. "You know, Miguel, I was thinking of you, on Christmas." "So what'd you do for Christmas?" I asked, knowing he had no family to welcome him in. "Oh, I was just right here," meaning his tiny little apartment where he lives alone. "All by yourself?" I ask. "Oh no," he quickly says. "I invited homies from the crew, vatos like me who didn't have no place to go for Christmas." He names the 5 homies who came over, all former enemies from rival gangs. "Really," I tell him, "that was sure nice of you." But he's got me revved and curious now, so I ask him, "What did you do?" "Well," he says, "you're not going to believe this, but I cooked a turkey." You can feel his pride right through the phone. "Wow, you did? Well, how'd you prepare it?" He says, "Ghetto style." I told him I'm not really familiar with this recipe. He's more than happy to give up his secret. "Yeah, well, you just rub it with a gang of butter and throw a bunch of salt and pepper on it, squeeze a couple of limes over it, and put it in the oven. It tasted proper." I said, "Well, that's impressive. What else did you have besides the turkey?" "Just that, just turkey," he says. His voice tapers to a hush. "Yeah, the 6 of us, we just sat there, staring at the oven, waiting for the turkey to be done." One would be hard-pressed to imagine something more sacred and ordinary than these 6 orphans staring at an oven together. It is the entire law and the prophets all in one moment, right there in this humble, holy kitchen. Not long after this, I give Miguel a ride home after work. I had been curious about Miguel's own certain resilience. When we arrive at his apartment, I say, "Can I ask you a question?" "How do you do it? I mean, given all that you've been through, all the pain and stuff you've suffered, how are you like the way you are?" I genuinely wanted to know, and Miguel had his answer at the ready. I always suspected that there was something of goodness in me, but I just couldn't find it. Until one day," he quiets a bit, "one day I discovered it here, in my heart. I found it. Goodness. And ever since that day, I have always known who I was." He pauses, caught short by his own truth, reteaching loveliness, and turns and looks at me, and now nothing can touch me. I think I'll just save the next one for another day. Let's just pause and let the words sink in for a moment. I can appreciate Miguel and Father Boyle and all the other Miguels and all the other Father Boyles. Many, many iterations of human beings and their goodness. And may we all be so blessed as to experience our own. Thanks everybody for your kind attention this morning. If you'd like to stay for small groups, Nico will